Late last month, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu revealed that he had been invited to visit China. That invitation underscores the absence of a similar one from the United States. In March, after sharp, rare criticism of Netanyahu for his proposed judicial overhaul, the U.S. President Joe Biden said that the Prime Minister would not receive a White House invitation in the near term. Months later, he has shown no sign of relenting. So where do matters between the two leaders and their countries stand? I am back with Joe Biden. Mr. President, what will it take for Bibi Netanyahu to get an invitation to the White House?
Well, first of all, the Israeli president is going to be coming. We have other contacts. I've been, as I think it's fair to say, an unyielding supporter of Israel for over, I've only been around a couple of years, but for as long as I've been around. And Bibi, I think, is trying to work through how we can work through his existing problems in terms of his coalition. He has, I'm one of those who believes that Israel's ultimate security rests in a two-state solution. I think it's a mistake to think that as some members of his cabinet, and this is one of the most extreme members of cabinets that I've seen. I go all the way back to Golda Meir and all, you know, and not that she was extreme, but I go back to that era. I think that the fact that the Palestinian Authority has lost its credibility, not necessarily because of what Israel's done, just because it's just lost its credibility, number one. And number two, created a vacuum for extremism among the Palestinians. The PLA, there's some very extreme elements. So it's not all Israel now on the West Bank, all Israel's problem, but they are part of the problem. And particularly those individuals in the cabinet who say they have no right to, we can settle anywhere we want, they have no right to be here, et cetera. And I think we're talking with them regularly, trying to tamp down what's going on, and hopefully Bibi will continue to move toward moderation and changing the court.
You've had tough words about Saudi Arabia from the start about the Khashoggi killing and things like that. You talked about needing a kind of new relationship. They've been pretty unyielding when you've asked them to pump more oil. They've slashed oil recently. Now Saudi Arabia wants a defense treaty from the United States, promising that you will protect them, and they want civilian nuclear capacity, which again, the US would have to provide. And in return, they would recognize Israel. Are you going to do it?
We're a long way from there. We got a lot to talk about. For example, that trip I went, which was criticized for my going, a number of things have happened on that trip. On that trip, I was able to negotiate overflights of Israeli aircraft can now overfly Saudi Arabia, number one. Number two, the price of oil is actually down, not up. And it's not because they have done one thing or the other, but the world's changing. Our policies relative to renewables are real. Number three, we found ourselves in a circumstance where the war in Yemen is essentially for a year now it's ended. The peace is being kept. So we're making progress in the region, and it depends upon the conduct and what is asked of us for them to recognize Israel. Quite frankly, I don't think they have much of a problem with Israel, quite frankly. And whether or not we would provide a means by which they could have civilian nuclear power and or be a guarantor of their security, I think that's a little way off.
Finally, Mr. President, you've often said when people ask you about your age, just watch me. And I think a lot of people do watch you and are impressed, and they think you've been a great president. You've brought the economy back. You've restored relations with the world. But many of these people do say, and these are ardent supporters of yours, the next thing he should do is step aside and let another generation of Democrats take the baton. Why are they wrong?
Well, let me, not right or wrong. Look, to use the phrase again, I think we're at an inflection point. I think the world is changing, and I think there is one thing that comes with age if you've been honest about it your whole life, and that is some wisdom. I think we're on the cusp of being able to make significant positive changes in the world. Really, honest to God, do. You see what we've done in Europe. Europe's more united than it's ever been since World War II, into World War II. You see what we've been able to do in the Indian Ocean and the South China Sea. We've united that part of the world, including the basically 50 island nations that are participating. They're going to be here, by the way, shortly. I think we're putting the world together in a way that is going to make things significantly, how can I say it, more secure for people. We're uniting democracies, have the possibility of uniting democracies in a way that hadn't happened ever. And so I think that whether it's the Far East, whether it's NATO, whether it's Europe, whether it's what's going on in Africa, I think we have enormous opportunities. And I think I just want to finish the job. And I think we can do that in the next 6 years.
Mr. President, it's been an honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks.
I want to thank President Biden for joining me. Next on GPS, my take. Some Republican candidates want to wage war on Mexico's drug cartels. I will explain why this is a terrible idea.